It's story time. Chapter 2. Stories with Lane.
So I never wanted to become a mambabatok. I grew up here in the States. When I was 19, I moved to Hawaii for a couple of years. And it was there that I was kind of awakened culturally, I guess. I felt a familiarity about a lot of different aspects of Hawaiian culture. And during that time, there was maybe just the bare bones beginnings of a Hawaiian Renaissance in terms of their tattooing, but the Samoans had already, they've had a continuous practice, and their practice is also thousands of years old. But it got me interested in what our culture in the Philippines, which is related to these other islands of the Pacific, what our tattooing culture was like. And so I began researching it and studying it, never with the intention to become a practitioner, but just to get the correct markings for my ancestry. And, over the years, after about 20 years of research, I released a book on Filipino tattooing. And I had been assisting with both the Samoans and the Hawaiians in their practice, what in Samoan they call it a koso, someone who stretches the skin so that the tattoo practitioner can make accurate and clean marks on the body. And I had been doing that, and people kept asking me, when are you going to start practicing? And I had no intention of doing it. But one day my dad called me up and he said, "Son, I have some bad news. I have cancer. I have mesothelioma." And for those of you who are not familiar with mesothelioma, it's pretty much a death sentence. It's a very aggressive cancer, and my dad assured me that we were going to fight it, of course. And so I went down to Arizona to spend time with him and help him and take him to his appointments. And the oncologist said that they would like to do radiation treatment for him in the hopes of prolonging his life. And so they made all these measurements on his body, marked them with Sharpie for the computer to target and irradiate his body. But they said, "Mr. Wilcken, we would like to tattoo these radiation targets on you so that we don't have to do the measurements every time. It'll, free up the time that you have." And he said, "Well, let me think about it." He went home and he was talking with me. He said, "Lane, I don't want a man I don't know with a machine I don't know touching my body. You've been studying tattooing all these years. You tattoo me." And I could not refuse my dying father. And so I got a stick, drilled a hole in it, picked a lemon thorn off of my mother's tree, put it into that wooden dowel, secured it, got some India ink, got a hitting stick to tap the other implement with, and my brother stretched, and we tattooed those radiation targets on my dad. And those were the first tattoos I ever did. My dad, he ended up passing, and I had told some of my friends in Northern California about my experience. And one thing about the Filipino community is that they love to gossip. They love to talk story. And before long, people were asking me for work, for ritual work. They knew that I had the background knowledge for it. They knew that I did it in a culturally appropriate way, and began asking me for the work. And over the years, it just kind of escalated and kept growing. And then people began calling me a mambabatok. And so that title was given to me by the community. I didn't crown myself that or anything like that. But I do my best to honor the title that my my community has given to me, and do the work in a good way. I don't tattoo everybody that asks me. Some people are not ready for it because they come from this Western mindset that this is just body art. This is a way of expressing myself. This isn't a form of personal expression or artistic expression per se. It's rooted in honoring our ancestors by receiving their marks. So there are some people that are just not ready for it, and I have to tell them, you know what, I think we need to wait. Most of the time, those are young 20-something gym rat males who want to have something that looks like the Rock's tattoo, and I don't do that.
These marking ceremonies open a connection to the spirit realm, and over the years, Lane has come across a variety of spirits that range from benevolent ancestors to terrifying entities.
This was the beginning in January of 2018. I was a guest lecturer at University of San Francisco, and so I flew up there to speak at the university as well as do a little bit of work while I'm there, tattooing a few people. And I had an appointment with this woman that I had tattooed about 2 years prior. And so I knew her, very quiet, demure woman. The last time I had tattooed her, it was a wonderful experience. But while I was there in San Francisco, it just felt wrong. That's the best way I can describe it. I didn't feel right going into the appointment. And the day came that I was supposed to go work on her. I woke up thinking, well, I think I'm probably going to cancel because I just don't feel right about this. There's something wrong. But during my morning prayers and meditation, I felt this thought come into my head: you need to go work on her because you can help her. So although I didn't want to work on her, I kept the appointment. And I had a brand new assistant, brand new stretcher to help me. And we went up to meet her and her partner. And as we're driving to their house, I just felt off. That feeling of anxiety got worse and worse the closer we got to their place. And when we got to the home, you could feel this type of tension in the air, almost like thick humidity. And it was palpable. It was oppressive almost. And so we knocked on the door. We came in. The feeling intensified, and I knew that there was something wrong. I knew that she had a spirit that was unwanted. And I don't always carry this with me, but I happen to have some dried guava leaves, which we use as a smudge, as well as other things in our herbal medicines in the Philippines. But I asked if I could smudge her, and she agreed. And so I got my guava leaves out, and I got them lit. And when I went towards her arm where we were going to tattoo, the smudge would go out. And so I knew there was probably a nasty entity with her. So I lit them again, made sure they were on fire good, and tried to cleanse her a little bit. But I knew it was just kind of softening the blow. It wasn't driving anything out. She was asking for this protective piece and had been asking for 1.5 years. I asked her, where do you want this protective piece? And she said, right here on the outside of my wrist. And her partner says, no, babe, you know that that's not where it's supposed to go. And this quiet, demure woman started getting hostile. She's like, I don't want it anywhere else. I want it here on the top of my wrist. She says, no, babe, you know it's supposed to go on the inside of your wrist. That's where you put your negativity. That's where you put your anger. I don't want it there. And they had kind of a low-key whisper fight while I'm standing there. It was very awkward, but her partner kind of gave her a look like, if you don't do it where it's supposed to go, it's a deal breaker. So she says, fine, I'll get it right there. And so I drew up the design on her wrist, and she starts getting really antsy, like nervous, like almost shaky. So we did the prayers, we summoned our ancestors, we did the food offerings, and it still felt wrong. I knew that I was in for a little bit of a battle. So my newbie stretcher and we get ready to go, and After the first 2 taps, she starts growling like an animal, making noises like that. And then she would alternate between that, laughing hysterically, and sobbing, and just go back and forth. And my poor new stretcher is looking at me like, holy crap, what is going on? And I just looked at him like, brother, just hold the stretch. And so I'm hammering away, trying to get the ink in her skin, and she's thrashing around. Her partner is holding her, trying to keep her steady while she's thrashing. And I got out a particular tool that I use that has a stingray barb on it that's been sharpened into 2 points that we dip that in the ink, and then you tap it into the skin. Well, in the Philippines, the stingray tail and barb are used to drive off aswang, what you would probably think of as a vampiric entity. And I got that little tool out, and I started finishing up the design, and she was howling. But right when I finished the design, she just and then just went limp. My new stretcher is looking at me like, what the hell was that? And I just flat out was blunt with those people, and I said, look, whatever that was, it's gone now. But if you don't make changes in your life, it'll find another way. It'll find another entry point into your body. And we packed up and got the hell out of there.
Not all marking ceremonies are like this. Sometimes the spirits that are present make themselves known in a much more subtle way.
There's subtle little experiences where you just feel a presence, or you'll get a chill for no reason while we're getting the work done, or the person will go to sleep while I'm tattooing, and they'll dream. They'll dream of ancestors, or they'll dream of their family or family members that have died. I remember once one of my apprentices and I were working, and all of a sudden this perfume came into the room, and we could all smell it. And I asked the recipient, I'm like, do you smell that? And she goes, yeah, that's my grandmother's perfume. So when we invite them, they come. A lot of people think that this method of tattooing is more brutal and hurts more than machine tattoos, when really it's the opposite. It actually is a lot less painful. Most people describe the experience, although they feel the pain, they feel that it is soothing, that the rhythms of the tapping are soothing, the comfort that they feel from the assistants who are stretching the skin, having their families present. Especially for women, they will often go to sleep while I work. And so it's not the same type of experience as getting machine tattooed.
When you are going to receive batok, you need to bring a food offering called an alay or atang. This serves 3 purposes.
One is to symbolically feed our ancestors and provide them with food. The second purpose is to distract the malevolent entities. In the Philippines, the belief is that spirits are attracted to blood. So obviously in tattooing, blood is being spilled, and it would attract spirits, and not necessarily good ones. So putting food aside for those ancestors, and as I mentioned before, in the old days, we would sacrifice an animal, and part of that animal would be set aside as the offering, so that the spirits will go to that food or to that blood rather than to the recipient. So it is a type of distraction to those that might be malevolent. The third purpose of it is practical. Flies and things that spread disease, they would go to the food rather than to the person's blood. So it's a way of minimizing the risk of infection. So although it's a spiritual practice, it is practical as well.
I could easily have spent hours on the phone with Lane with the number of stories he had, but for the sake of time, I asked him to share his favorites.
I have another possession story that's more comedic, and I can't mention names. I went down to LA to do some work, to tattoo a few recipients down there. And this woman had contacted me. The woman was a mainstream Christian, so didn't necessarily believe in a lot of the supernatural or anything like that. But she asked if she could set an appointment for her daughter to celebrate her daughter's sobriety, X amount of years. And of course, I thought that's a wonderful reason to get some marks done. So, yeah. So we set an appointment, and my host in LA is known for having spiritual ability, and she's a traditional healer. The day of the appointment arrives, and this woman who I met before gets out of the car, and then this girl gets out of the car. Looks like she's a tween, like somewhere between 12 and 14 years old. Now, Filipinos look young. They can look young for a long time. My mom will still claim that she's 16, even though she's in her 70s. And so I thought, well, maybe she just looks really young. And so when she came in and we had a chance to talk, everything about this young woman seemed like she was 14 or 13 years old. Just her body language, the way she carried herself, the way she talked was like a little kid. And I pulled the woman aside and said, so how old is your daughter again? I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to tattoo a minor. She's 24. And what? Oh, trying to stop my surprise. Oh, she looks young. You can never tell with Filipinas. And I joked, but it was really kind of off-putting that she seemed like a little girl. So, we do all the protocols and everything like that, and we start tattooing. And partially through the tattoo, I had my host helping stretch, the woman who's a traditional healer. And we get halfway to the work, and all of a sudden the ink won't go into her skin. It just won't go. And so I checked my tool. I'm like, did I break my tool? Is it not sharp or something? I look at the tool. No, it's still super needle sharp. I dip it back in the ink. I try a tattoo again. It won't go in. It just won't go in. And so I'm thinking, okay, something's going on here. Let me see what's going on. And so, just put my tool down for a second, and I just kind of put my hand over the spot that wasn't accepting the ink. And right when I went over the spot, this image comes into my head of that little girl from The Exorcist. It was just my brain's way of telling me, yeah, she got something, and it's yucky. And it was so surprising when I floated my hand over that area, that image popping in my head. I actually was taken aback, physically taken aback from it. And my host picked up on that, and she sensed it too. And she looks at me like, we got to do an extraction. We got to get rid of that thing. But how do we do that in front of her mom, who is a very hardcore Christian? And so we try to do this on the sly. We try to remove it on the sly. And in our traditional medicine in the Philippines, there's you would extract that from the person, and if there's nothing to put it into, you internalize it, and then you have to expel it. And sometimes that's very violently through like vomiting or just burping, really, or things like that. You have to get rid of it, or place it into something else. So we just kind of, well, let's just take a little break here, and how you doing, and got our hands on her trying to pull this thing out, and we start burping. Both she and I, we burp, burp, burp. Oh, I don't know what I ate. Oh, burp. And she's like, I don't know either. Wow. Burp, burp, burp. And my host looks at me like, hey, let me take the bulk of this because you still got to do the work. So she starts doing some heavy extraction and these big old belches coming out of her. Finally she goes, can you guys excuse me for a moment? And she leaves and goes upstairs behind closed doors, lets out 2 gigantic farts, and comes back downstairs, and we heard it downstairs, but then glided my hand over the area, and it felt clear, and went back to tattooing. The ink went right in. The young woman's demeanor totally changed after that. She acted more mature. It was really strange. Just the timbre of her voice changed. It was her behavior and everything was more age appropriate after we finished the tattoo. We have a saying where We love it when we're just physically tired and not spiritually tired or emotionally tired, exhausted after doing this type of work. We don't always have these super big paranormal experiences, and sometimes they're just very small things, just little subtleties like perfumes of the grandmother coming in, or feeling someone touch them. I've been doing work on a woman in Hawaii. She's Filipina, but her wife is Samoan. And one time when I was tattooing her, I kept having these Samoan words pop into my head. And then the words were popping into Natalia's head too, different words.
Natalia is Lane's apprentice.
And neither one of us speaks Samoan. And so we said to her wife, "Hey, what does this mean?" And I was like, "It means very skillful." And I think that my ancestors are here watching you guys work. Then these other little messages would come through in Samoan, and we'd have to go to the wife and ask her what it means. And she'd say, "Oh yeah, they're saying that the tufunga, the tattoo practitioner, is skillful," or keep strong, keep strong. "Oh no, he's getting tired, keep strong, stuff like that." And it was just kind of funny. And then Natalia said, "Someone keeps saying something to me and I don't understand what they're saying, but they have a raspy voice, and it's a woman. Who is that?" And the wife would say, "Oh, that's my auntie. She just passed away, last year, and she's got this raspy voice." Just weird little things like that happen.
Not all ancestors who show up during ceremonies are as pleased with Lane's work.
So we had this appointment with this woman up in Chicago. She's of mixed heritage. And so different places in the Philippines, they were colonized earlier than others, I guess you'd say. And so some of her ancestry, what we call Kapapangan, it's a particular ethnic group from Luzon. And they had stopped their tattooing practice very, very early on, possibly even prior to the Spanish advent because of Islamization in the Philippines. But their practice has not been around for centuries upon centuries. Whereas on her other side, her father's side, they tattooed up until the 1600s, maybe into the 1700s, before the practice was totally lost. So more recent ancestors that had tattoos, whereas the other side hadn't tattooed in probably a millennia. So if a person comes from a mixed background, often we will tattoo the father's side on the right side of the body and the mother's lineage on the left side of the body. So the father's side of this particular woman's ancestry were from the Visayas, and so more recently had tattoos. And you could feel all those ancestors celebrating when we started doing the work, just celebrating. And we were doing a chest piece on this woman, kind of a collar piece that wraps around the front. And the father's side, on the right side, her skin was thirsty. It just drank in the ink. It was going so smooth, so fast. 45 minutes to the center of her chest. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, we're going to get done with this quick tonight, have time to relax and enjoy each other's company and talk story a little bit. This is great. But when I got over to the mother's side, the skin wasn't accepting the ink very well. And I started having all these thoughts come into my head. You can't do it. You should just stop. It's too hard. Tell her that you'll finish it another time. You're too tired. And I had entertained these thoughts for a few minutes, like, maybe I should stop. Then the thought comes into my head, these are not your thoughts, Lane. This is somebody who doesn't want this work to happen. And so I had to shut myself off from that entity, that ancestress who did not want it to happen. I would say she was probably before the turn of the last century. So a recent ancestress, Catholic, didn't understand why her descendant was getting these pagan marks on her body and just didn't want it to happen. And so I kept going. And so she couldn't afflict me, but she was trying to afflict Natalia. She was trying to afflict the descendant. And the descendant started really suffering through the pain. And I kept, we asked her, want to continue? She goes, yeah, let's get it done. So the first side, the father's side, only took 45 minutes. The mother's side, the Kapapangan side, took 3 hours. You could feel, we felt this ancestress, once the tattooing was complete, so disheartened that this had happened and just left. In that particular case, we did debrief with the woman afterwards and said, this is what has happened. This is who we sense it might be. Maybe find out who this ancestress is and make an offering to her or appease her in some way. So this woman went home. Her friends and family that came with her went home. The next morning, I got up and realized that the woman had forgotten her food offering to her ancestors. Normally, a person is to take care of that after the tattooing, and there's a number of ways to dispose of it. You can bury it, you can put it in a body of water, you can let it desiccate, and then it's considered consumed, and then it's okay to get rid of. Some people will go put it underneath a tree and allow the animals to take care of it. But you're supposed to care for that offering. Well, this woman was probably in just a very different headspace after going through 4 hours of tattooing and forgot it. So I noticed the offering there. I'm like, well, I'll go ahead and take care of the offering. So Natalia was up. She was in the kitchen. And I reach over and I put my hands on the plate to go care for the offering. And as immediately as I picked up the plate, both Natalia and I had an instant headache. And she goes, she came back. She came back. And I'm like, yeah, I can feel her, meddling with my head, trying to give me a headache. And I just spoke very plainly to this spirit. I said, look, your descendant has already been tattooed. She's received her marks. You need to leave. And if you don't leave, I'm going to disrespect your offering. I'm going to just throw it in the dirt outside. And so I did. And then she left. One of the goals of my work is to reestablish the literacy of our people. Because this practice has been extinct in most parts of the Philippines for hundreds of years now, it's important for our community, our people, to recover the literacy of our designs. And so I never tattoo anyone with anything that I don't explain first. I want them to be able to understand exactly what they're getting on their body, so that when other members of our community and even outside of our community ask, they can explain what those designs mean.
To learn more about Lane and his work, visit his website in the show notes, lanewilcken.com.